Happy Friday, everyone. Today is July 12th, and this is episode 49 of Get Your Tech On, our show on all things DOCSIS. I'm Brady Volpe, founder of NimbleThis and the Volpe firm. With us today is John Downey, a very tired John Downey. He's, I think, recently flown in, and John is also technical leader at Cisco Systems. John, welcome back, and glad to have you with us.
Yeah. I flew a red eye last night from Argentina. I'm just getting in. I did change my shirt, so at least you got a clean shirt. You can't smell me, so I'm good.
I did actually, I was looking over your title again here. You are a CMTS technical leader, right?
Yes.
So technically, where do you lead CMTSs?
to the graveyard. Well, you think about it, we're going more cloud, right?
Yep.
So it seems like hardware is kind of going away. That's the evolution. That's the migration that we're going towards. But you know as well as I, old technology doesn't go away. We still have 1.1 modems out there. Still have 2.0 modems out there. So people are going to have CMTSs for 10, 15, 20 years. Newer stuff might evolve into cloud,
Yeah, it is amazing when you say old technology doesn't go away, because it is remarkable how many customers I still see out there with a lot of old equipment. I mean, DOCSIS 2.0 CMTSs even sometimes, so to your point, it doesn't go away. But I do think the future is as you're saying, virtualization. And I have some interesting stuff in the news that I want to touch on, because this is there's some kind of cool stuff going on out there. One of them focuses on virtualization, and this one's kind of interesting thing that came up. So Comcast is committing millions of dollars to Harmonic's CableOS platform, which is a totally virtualized platform, and that's, I think, one of the reasons they're looking at that. So that I think is one of the things that this article is focusing on here, is according to the 8K document filed Tuesday by Harmonic, that Comcast has elected effective July 1st for enterprise licensing, and it is committed to $175 million in software license fees over the 4-year term. I think that seems like a low amount of money, but when you look at Harmonic's platform, and part of what this talks about is the fact that it's all off-the-shelf equipment, meaning it's basically servers, Dell servers or Intel servers that they're putting that virtualized system on, and then they can plug and play with virtually anyone's RPDs, remote PHY devices, and stuff like that. So I think this is really the wave of the future, is virtualization, and I think as we saw at ANGA, everyone's sort of talking about virtualization of the CCAP platforms. We kind of see this going on. We see it the same in test equipment as well. So that was one thing that caught my eye. This next one, I think is a game changer. This is from TechDirt. Can't see it at the top of the heading there. The interesting thing in the article, I think, first of all, is the title, where it says Google's dead wrong if it thinks broadband caps won't hurt game streaming. The overall article is what Google is doing is they're changing the dynamics of the way gaming is. And first of all, I just did an article for Broadband Library, it'll be coming out in a couple of months, their next issue. And I'm a gamer. I did a lot of research for this. It's basically focused on low latency in gaming. And I was really shocked by how big the gaming industry, monetarily, how big the gaming industry is, and who the users of the gaming industry is, meaning that the median age of the gamer is 31 years old. So it's not like 11 and 12-year-olds like my wife always accuses me of go play with your 11-year-old friends. So it's people who make decisions, buying decisions of, like what service they're going to use. But you have to read my article when it comes out. It's really surprising how much money's in the gaming industry, and I think Google realizes this. So what Google is doing here is they're creating a service called Stadia. What Stadia does is it virtualizes your console games, like your Xboxes, your Nintendos, everything like that, your PlayStations, even computers that need high-end gaming cards. You're not going to require that anymore. Google's going to do all that computation in their cloud computing service. Google's cloud is equivalent to like AWS and Microsoft Azure. And they're going to stream that content over the internet. So they're doing computation in the cloud, and then they're streaming the video games directly to whatever device you want to play it on, whether it's a TV, an iPhone, Android phone, computer, and you just need the touch controls or some type of a controller to be able to play the game. The crux of this article is what they're saying is, today operators are capping the amount of data that you're streaming in, primarily the downstream, and say, well, if you, for example, AT&T does not cap if you use AT&T streaming service, but if you use Netflix, they're going to cap it. Comcast has caps on their services and stuff. The interesting thing here is they say that if you use Stadia, you're going to blow through, as an example, Comcast's 1 terabyte cap in a matter of just 3 days using Stadia's service, their gaming service. And so I think that's sort of to give everyone an example of how much data will be streamed over this Stadia gaming service, because there's not going to be any you're not going to be buying CDs or anything like that to put into an Xbox anymore. There's none of that's going to happen. It's all
you won't even have an Xbox, right?
You won't even have an Xbox, exactly. And they're saying the processing can be done on smart TVs, because the processing now that occurs in an Xbox or a GeForce, a really powerful gaming video card, that's not going to be necessary anymore. And that's their goal, is to make gaming much more accessible to a lot of users who today can't afford to go out and buy a big gaming rig. Yeah. And the thing beyond that is all the big gaming companies, Epic, everyone else is behind Google on this. They're getting on board because they see now they can access more users. So the reason I said I thought the heading was interesting is, they're saying Google's dead wrong if it thinks broadband caps are gonna hurt the gaming industry, are gonna hurt game streaming. I'm kind of wondering, who's right and who's wrong here. Is it going to be Google that's wrong, or is it going to be the cable operators or the broadband providers that are wrong here? Because at the end of the day, is it really the customer that's right? Is it the subscriber that's right that says, if you're going to cap me, I'm going to go find another provider, or I'm going to find another way to get this service. So I think this is also going to be game changing here, game changing for gamers. Because this is, I think, one of those market-changing things that's going to occur. Very interesting to see how it's going to unravel. And
talk about really, what is the next killer app. This could be the next killer app.
This could be the next killer app I think we're looking at here, because it's changing completely the way gaming is. And like I said, read my next article coming out in Broadband Library, because it's amazing the money that's involved in gaming, and also the way people are changing. Read my article; it's good. Final thing in the news that I found was neat. So I think several months ago we talked about Tesla looking at putting in broadband satellites low Earth orbit, 3,236 feet. So now Amazon is doing the same thing. They're looking at putting in about 3,000 or more of these satellites in low Earth orbit. They're trying to get FCC approval right now. So, I mean, who does this benefit? Well, benefits people like you, John, who live out in the middle of nowhere. and
it would.
You don't want to have a high Earth orbit satellite like Hughes, because you get just horrible latency and it's slow. So we get these low Earth lower satellites.
Leo,
yes.
Yeah.
And it's much better for particularly rural areas where you just don't have the high speed connection. And so this is a great thing.
You think about it like cell phones and mobile service. Just take that terrestrial network and just move it up into the air.
Absolutely.
That's basically what we're doing. You're just moving like towers, if you will, up into the air. People talked about doing blimps and balloons and planes flying over top. But if we can do, the reason why we do geosynchronous satellites is it's synchronous with geo, which is the Earth, right? So you got to go above the equator, 22,000 miles, whatever it is, so that you can focus on a satellite and you stay connected to that satellite forever. But when you move the satellites closer, you don't have the same orbit as the rotation as the Earth. So you have to go more satellites to get more coverage, and you have to have handoffs and stuff like that. But Yeah, if you get good coverage with all these satellites, I mean, it's a lot of space trash. It's a lot of stuff out there. And then once we get that, we have good coverage, and then we have Cyberdyne and
it's like
Terminator 3.
The future's getting really near.
Got to wear shades.
Yeah, I think the one problem is low Earth LEO satellites will have is latency still. So I mean that'll be the opportunity broadband's still going to have over satellites.
I agree. It's like the question will be, what does low mean? Low could be relative. Is it halfway? So instead of 22,000 miles, it's still 11,000 miles? I mean, still, it's going to be a lot of delay. Just like my voice in my picture right now.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So our topic today is cable modem registration, kind of getting back to some basic things, because we got lots of new people out there who just haven't been through some of these trainings we've given before. So I'm gonna go through my sort of basic cable modem registration. Doesn't really cover DOCSIS 3.1 stuff, but it kind of gets the fundamentals in there. And I'm sure you'll come in with a lot of your input as well to add on to my sort of what I call the color commentary. CM registration simplified overview, and this is sort of a presentation I've given many times, but it all starts with a basics. So I kind of have this. For people listening to podcasts, I have a basic slide up here that has a CMTS on one side, a cable modem on the other side. It shows an upstream and a downstream. And the fundamental here is the RF plant is in the center. And we kind of build the RF plant, DOCSIS protocol on top of that, and IP protocol on top of that. But before I really talk about cable modem registration, we have to assume the physical plant is working. And if the physical plant's not sound and reliable, cable modem's not going to register. So that is always something we have to assume is working well. So, we take a cable modem out of the box, at a subscriber's home. We plug in the power. First we plug in the coax to the cable modem. Then we plug in the power, and you start to see those lights blink on the front of the cable modem. And we always use the lights blinking as a way of understanding really whether or not that cable modem's come online. But a lot of times we don't understand if the lights are working or not and stuff like that. I'm just looking here. We got the Agent 7, Junior 7 here said, John is just illustrating how difficult echo cancellation is in FDX. So that's back to your problems, John. So you plug the cable modem, you power it in, you got the lights flashing, and a lot of folks don't, they understand, well, yeah, I've got downstream lock, I've got upstream lock, and the modem comes online. And what we're going to talk about is what's going on behind there. So first of all, on the left-hand side of my slide, I have a CMTS. On the right-hand side of the slide, I have what the cable modem's doing. In the first box, we show a sync. So the CMTS sends out sync messages. These are kind of like timing messages. And they send out these sync messages every 200 milliseconds. It's kind of keeping all the cable modems in synchronization that are online. The CMTS is also sending out UCD messages. These are upstream channel descriptors. That tells the cable modem basically, what language it's going to communicate. It has information about what the upstream channels are, about what the upstream bandwidth is, things that this cable modem needs to know to transmit on the upstream. And then the CMTS is also sending out MAP messages. So these are media access protocol. Is that what they are, John? The media access protocol messages? MAP, do you remember? I've heard that it actually wasn't an acronym at one time. No, it is an acronym.
Mapping of time.
It's media access. I know that. I just can't remember if the P is protocol or not. So anyhow, it's irrelevant. Someone can look it up and tell us if we're right or not.
We're supposed to be the experts, right?
Yeah, stump the chumps. So anyhow, the map messages are just telling cable modems everything is scheduled in DOCSIS. So cable modems can't just randomly communicate at their whim. They have to know, here's an opportunity for me to transmit in the upstream, and that's the map message is just synchronizing every cable modem when they can transmit. So the cable modem, when it first comes online, the first job it has to do is find out what are the downstream DOCSIS channels? Because we have a lot of QAM channels in a downstream. Some of them could be video QAM, some could be analog channels, and then we have the DOCSIS QAM channels. So a cable modem will start scanning the downstream and look for the DOCSIS QAM channels. If it locks on, and this is just talking about SC QAM, we're not even talking about OFDM here. So if it looks for a QAM channel, it'll lock on a QAM channel, an SC QAM channel, and it looks for that sync message that the CMTS is sending, that timing message. If it finds the sync message, it looks for a UCD message, the message that basically says...
So let's back up a second real quick. Because when DOCSIS first came out, it was MPEG-2 encapsulated, or I guess encapsulated is a good word for it. The intent was to be able to mix DOCSIS and video together, and no one ever does that, but that was the original intent. So DOCSIS is MPEG-2, has 4.5 bytes for every 188 byte MPEG frame, but there's a PID, a program identifier, of 1 FFE that indicates DOCSIS. So if the modem locks on a regular QAM and that PID is not correct, it's a video QAM, then it'll just move on to the next QAM.
Yep.
And the next QAM has the PID of 1 FFE, then it says, okay, this must be a DOCSIS QAM. And then it'll start doing the other stuff.
Correct. Yeah, so it can do that differentiation before it even goes to this next step. Once it finds that DOCSIS channel, the 1 FFE, then it says, okay, does this DOCSIS channel have the sync message, the UCD message? If it doesn't have those, it could be, we get into sort of DOCSIS 3.0, it could be a secondary channel. In which case...
Yeah, the other question would be, depending on the modem vendor, where do you start scanning? You know, it has a table built into it that says start at 453 or start at 550 or start at 120. And the cable company could have asked the vendor to put a proprietary scanning table in.
Yeah,
so
always
start at 700.
So that's, you raise a good point there, because a lot of times folks will go into field and wonder why it takes so long for a modem to lock on a downstream. And it could be because they have their DOCSIS channel just below where that cable modem has been programmed to start looking for its first downstream channel. So as an example, if it starts looking at 500 megahertz and your DOCSIS channel is down at 499 megahertz, it's going to start at 500 megahertz, go all the way up to say 860 megahertz, and then go down to the lowest channel and go up to 499. So it'll have to scan the whole band. And every modem, it's gotten progressively faster as modem technology has improved, because modems have now broadband tuners rather than earlier modems that had narrowband tuners. But depending on where your DOCSIS channel is and where that cable modem is programmed to start searching for DOCSIS channels, it could take a long time. So to your point, John, some operators will have the modems programmed to start looking exactly where the DOCSIS channel is. That really speeds up the time it takes to lock on a downstream. Some operators will burn in the modems in the head end, so when it does lock, the cable modem remembers at least its last 1 or 2 channels that it locked into. So when you go out to the subscriber's house, it remembers that downstream channel that got programmed in the head end, and then it'll quickly lock at the subscriber's house. So as a tech, you're not waiting at the subscriber's house for 20, 30 minutes for the modem to find a downstream if it's brand new out of the box.
Correct.
I think those are all good things to point out. So now, the modem locks on the downstream, finds the sync, finds the UCD, finds the map, and says, okay, finally I'm on that DOCSIS. So that's all part of that very first step of locking to the downstream channel. So
how do you confirm? So let me give you my dilemma. I'm in the head end. I'm logged into the CMTS. I don't see a modem's MAC address at all. So at that point, I don't know if it's upstream or downstream. So I usually ask the technician or the customer, hey, is the downstream LED solid? Because if the modem has an LED that's solid, then the downstream must be fine because it's locked. Because from the CMTS perspective, you don't see anything until the modem starts doing some upstream. But you don't know from the CMTS perspective if it's a downstream issue or not.
Yeah.
It could be downstream power levels are bad. But, if the modem has the solid LED for downstream sync and then you see it blinking on the upstream, then at least you know the downstream is locked.
Yep. Yeah, so that's basically what what you're doing with the LEDs is looking for that first light to light solid, and then you got the lock. So once you got the lock, now what's going to happen is, actually I think I'm on the wrong slide here. Once you have the downstream lock, now the cable modem has to get lock on the upstream. So the first thing the cable modem starts doing is it's going to transmit at its lowest transmit power, which is for a DOCSIS 2 cable modem 8 dBmV, for a DOCSIS 3.0 cable modem 23 dBmV, and I'm not sure what it is for a DOCSIS 3.1 modem. Do you know what that is, John? Is it also 23 dBmV?
It might be 23 as well,
yeah,
if I recall.
And the reason a cable modem will start at its lowest transmit power is in order to make sure that it doesn't transmit over other cable modems, because this is a contention window here when we begin transmitting. So what a contention window is the CMTS basically says, hey, any cable modem that wants to start coming online and sending its range request messages, here's a window of opportunity, because at this point, these cable modems basically are not known by the CMTS. So they will send a range request to the CMTS and basically say, hey, I'm here, can you hear me? Now, it transmits at a really low level. The CMTS is not going to be able to hear that modem, so if it does not get a range response back from the CMTS, basically the CMTS saying, hey, yeah, I can hear you, it'll increase its transmit power by 3 dB and try again and say, hey, Mr. CMTS, can you hear me now? And it'll keep doing that process until the CMTS responds back with a range response. And the range response, so the first step of the cable modem sending range requests is normally called a NIT R1. So you'll see that maybe on the CMTS or some dashboards. Sometimes modems are stuck in a NIT R1 because they're sending that range request to the CMTS, but they're never getting the response back from the CMTS. Once the CMTS responds back with a range response saying, hey, yeah, Mr. Cable Modem, I can hear you, now it's in a NIT R2, where now the CMTS is starting to make power adjustments, timing adjustments, maybe pre-equalization adjustments to the cable modem, and that's a NIT R2, where it's now in initial, it's starting the ranging process, but the cable modem still is not online. The CMTS is just making timing and power, frequency, and maybe pre-equalization adjustments to that cable modem so that it's at the right, it's basically at the right settings that it should be to communicate with the CMTS. So, any thoughts on that, John? Did you want to add?
Yeah. So to reiterate, there would be, or to add more to it, would be when a modem's in a NIT R1 and initial ranging. That is the initial ranging, initial maintenance burst in a mod profile. So when you look at a mod profile, the IM burst is being used during a NIT R1. In that mod profile, there is FEC T bytes there. So you could have some uncorrectable FEC during NIT R1 because in NIT R1, there's no scheduled time. You don't know where the modem is. It has some opportunity to send. So you have multiple modems trying to register at the same time. They have collisions and they back off. So if they have collisions, and because the mod profile incorporates the FEC T byte, you're going to get uncorrectable FEC. So a word of caution there would be don't track your uncorrectable FEC until you know things have settled down in regards to registration. Also, if you see a lot of modems in a NIT R1, it doesn't even have to be a lot. I could have one modem stuck in a NIT R1 chewing up all my initial maintenance opportunities, and other modems are not even getting to a NIT R1 because this one is using up all the opportunities. So, for instance, I had an example like that where a modem was in a NIT R1 with bad levels, and the last 10 modems out of 200 wouldn't come online. So it was a bit strange. So it's something to look for. Is a NIT R1 is contention time. You could have collisions. Once modems get to a NIT R2, they get their timing, they get their power levels, they get their pre-equalization, their unicast opportunities, so it's actually timed to do that fine ranging. So you don't have to worry about having collisions when the modem's in a NIT R2. And then in NIT R2, as far as the mod profile goes, would be the station maintenance burst. So whatever settings are in the station maintenance burst, that's what's used during NIT R2.
Right. All right. So the next process after that, now the cable modem should have the right power, should have the right timing, should be in sync with all the other modems in the system. So now we can start doing IP level, higher level communications, in which case now the modem can send a request to the CMTS and say, hey, I'd like to send some data on the network. So it sends a request to the CMTS. The CMTS responds with a map message that says, okay, here, at this time in the future, you can send some data. So when that grant comes down to the modem can send a DHCP discover message to the DHCP server, which is not part of the CMTS. It's a separate server. And so now we're talking IP communications here. And the DHCP server will respond back with a DHCP offer. It'll get an IP address. There's an acknowledgement sent back and forth. And now the modem actually knows how to send and receive data on the network because it has all that thing, an IP address, default gateway, the information for the time of day server, TFTP server, stuff like that. It'll ask for the time of day from the time of day server. So when you get log messages on the modem, you can actually see that there's a proper time of day associated with the log messages. And then finally, the final steps of registering with a CMTS is that the cable modem, again, it'll ask the CMTS, say, I want to transmit some more data. It'll get a grant from the CMTS, and it'll request the TFTP boot file, the configuration file that was handed to, the name of the configuration file that was handed to the modem during the DHCP process. It'll download that TFTP file, and the TFTP file gives the modem a lot of information. This is like your maximum transmit speed, your maximum, upload and download speed, a number of other pieces of information like whether or not we're going to use encryption, which is called BPI or Baseline Privacy Interface Specification. So this is all the information that the modem needs to know to do the rest of coming online. Then it'll send a request to the CMTS to say, okay, I have everything I think I need to know to come online. There's some shared secrets in there, and it'll send those to the CMTS. The CMTS will review that information, see if this is a valid modem, and then if it is, it'll send it in a registration response, and this cable modem will send in a registration acknowledgement, and at that you'll finally see that network light come on, and the modem at this point is fully online.
So let me add in,
of course,
my 2 cents. So once the modem goes from a NIT R1, NIT R2, and NIT RC for range complete, and we get into the back office side of the modem registration, like a NIT D, I have my own little mnemonic, DORA, discover, offer, request, acknowledge. So that's the DHCP process, right? So the first thing is discover. So you'll see a modem in a NIT D from the CMTS perspective. Once I get to that point, the CMTS is actually, and the modem's actually using a data burst, not any part of the maintenance mod profile bursts. So in the mod profile, you have request burst, initial maintenance, station maintenance, A short, A long, AUGS. So the A means advanced. So a lot of times a NIT D modem's actually using an A short burst to do a NIT D. So I've had cases where the MER was subpar. And because the ranging of the modem was using QPSK or 16 QAM, it actually went through fine, and then the modem got stuck in a NIT D. So there's 2 reasons it would get stuck in a NIT D. One, it can't get to the helper address. Like the server you mentioned, usually we call it a helper address. So on the CMTS, we have a bundle interface that we put a cable helper address, and that's usually the IP of the server, where your DHCP server is. Well, if I can't get to it, then the modem can't get to it. So you might want to do a ping, and just a ping from the CMTS might not tell the whole story. You might have to do a ping from the bundle interface or wherever the modems are coming from. So like your what your target address is, but you might have to change your source address for your ping. If ping works, and you have access to the DHCP server, what if it's upstream noise? Because if I'm trying to do a NIT D, the cable modem is trying to use an A short burst at 64 QAM, and if the MER is only 20 dB, well then maybe 16 QAM works, and that's fine for maintenance. That's why the modem was able to go a NIT R1, a NIT R2, a NIT RC, and then it got stuck in a NIT D. So my point is, never disregard the physical plant. it might be a registration issue, or it might be a server issue, no access to that DHCP server, but it could still be a plan issue.
Yeah, and I think that's really worth emphasizing highly, that because I think a lot of people don't understand that there's different profiles assigned to different data transmissions on the cable modem, and for station maintenance, it's very common that operators will assign station maintenance either QPSK or 16 QAM, as you were saying, and station maintenance is this init R1, init R2, where the cable modem's sending the ranging request to the CMTS. And so if there's a lot of noise, that ranging request will almost always get through to the CMTS if the upstream is QPSK. And then they'll assign a higher order modulation like 64 QAM to the data. And the data is what the subscribers send back and forth. The data is also what is DHCP is sent on, or TFTP is sent on. So to your point, John, we can do a init R1 just fine. We can do a init R2 just fine if they're set to QPSK or maybe 16 QAM. And then when we actually try to send the data that the subscribers would also be using, which is at 64 QAM, it's going to get stuck there. It's not going to get its IP address, or maybe it will get its IP address because it's, a little bit of data, but then it tries to download the TFTP file. It can't download that, or can't make that communication. So I've seen modems maybe pass sometimes DHCP because it tries it multiple times, but then gets stuck downloading the TFTP file, or sometimes gets stuck in DHCP for precisely the reason that you're saying. And I think for someone just to understand that fundamental process of, well, it's getting through the initialization stage of ranging, but it can't get beyond that. It's using a higher order modulation to get to use that. So that gives us another piece of information to say you can do the first part because we're at a lower modulation, can't do the next part because it's a higher order modulation. That's a noise issue.
Correct. And the other thing I would add was when the modem is doing TFTP, the state from the CMTS would be init O. So init O means options file. The options file is the TFTP process. If the modem has parameters in the CM file when you do the TFTP, and the parameters are not good for that modem, a lot of times the result will be reject C.
Yeah.
So if you see modems come up reject C for reject class of service, basically something's wrong with the CM file. It didn't like it.
So, John, there's a lot of people complaining, saying that you have a ton of echo coming back. I'm actually not hearing the echo. They're wondering if maybe you have some external speakers or something like that coming back. I will tell everyone we're making an audio recording at the same time. That's the one that goes up on the podcast. So if you don't like John's audio, you can just stop listening to us now and catch the podcast version of this. It'll have good audio on it. I promise you that. So I apologize if you're having issues with John's audio. We'll make sure the podcast sounds awesome. So
okay.
I don't know what's wrong. John, I think we had echo problems with the last session too. So we'll have to figure out what's going on that causes the echo on the YouTube version of it. But I don't hear it, man. You sound good to me.
Okay.
So, all right. So that's what I wanted to cover on just the, again, really basics of the slides. I think we covered some good issues there as far as like what can happen on that. John, is there anything you wanted to cover on this? I think, T2 or T3 and T4 timeouts are something I definitely wanted to catch on this, because this is a lot of times where basically the registration process, not necessarily, you will get T3, T4 timeouts, but this is where we can normally talk about them. Do you want to cover those in your slides, or do you want to?
No. Let me talk about it generically. To me, the station maintenance that happens ongoing after registration is, for us, the Cisco CMTS, it's every 15 seconds when we use line card redundancy. If we're not doing line card redundancy, we're every 20 seconds. So let's assume it's every 15 seconds for every modem. It's a three-way handshake, right? CMTS says, I want to see 0 plus or minus 1. If you're outside that range, the CMTS on that next station maintenance period is going to say, change your level accordingly. The cable modem changes it, and the CMTS might say, good. So there's a three-way handshake. So every 15 seconds, we're doing upstream leveling. From the leveling, we're getting upstream MER readings. Time offsets are being readjusted if need be, and pre-equalization. So the pre-equalization taps are being reacquired or reset every 15 seconds. Now, the problem I'm seeing lately is when we do DOCSIS 3.0 upstream bonding, there's something called a T4 multiplier. And at least for Cisco's case, the default is auto, which means whatever you're using for upstream bonding, that's the multiplier. So, for example, if a modem is doing 4-channel upstream bonding, it's going to be a 4x multiplier. So 15 seconds times 4 is 60 seconds. So if a modem has 4 upstreams, it's getting every 60 seconds, it's getting an update to each one of those upstreams. That means if I have noise on upstream 0, maybe it's group delay just for that modem. It's not noise funneling. It's not out of white Gaussian noise. It's frequency response. It's group delay. It's micro reflections. On upstream 0 for that one cable modem, he's not getting an update for 60 seconds. So while I like the idea of the T4 multiplier to limit the amount of station maintenance happening, because the modem has 4 upstreams, so basically it has 4x redundancy, if you will, or resiliency, because there's 4 upstreams doing station maintenance, using that auto T4 multiplier can lose granularity of my MER on my upstream levels and my pre-equalization. And that's one of my concerns. And if we went to 8-channel upstream bonding, it would be even worse.
So are we doing this multiplier to save upstream bandwidth? What was the original concept behind the multiplier?
And I think that was the case, is if you have 10,000 modems, DOCSIS 2.0, you're doing 10,000 station maintenance bursts. If you have 10,000 DOCSIS 3.0 modems, you're basically doing 40,000 station maintenance bursts.
Right.
Every modem now is like 4 modems, right? Because it's doing 4 channels.
Yeah, so we have a lot less maintenance if we're doing that multiplier.
Yeah, so by doing the multiplier, number of channels is the multiplier, you're basically back to where you started.
Okay, makes sense. So and I would think this becomes even worse with like pre-equalization, which, so, if we're using PNM, we use pre-equalization to really not fix return path impairments, but to compensate for return path impairments until we get out there and fix them. So by using that multiplier, are we losing some of the capability of pre-equalization, or it just takes longer for pre-equalization to respond?
It's longer to respond, so I would say you're losing visibility or quickness to response, or responsiveness. Maybe that's a good word.
Yeah.
So 60 seconds to get an update, you could obviously have a lot of things happen in 60 seconds. So the wind blows, the cable shakes, you have poor MER because an uncorrectable FEC, and then once the station maintenance comes through 60 seconds later, the pre-EQ reacquires, and now it looks good again. But there was 60 seconds of potentially losing, that's a whole minute. It doesn't sound like a lot, but in the realm of 10 megabits per second, it is a lot.
Mm-hmm. So what do we do about it? Is there anything that can be done?
So one is understanding it, so educating people to understand what it does. For instance, the other thing we have, an RF tech goes to the house and unplugs the RF cable. They're like, man, how come this downstream staying locked for so long? Because of the T4 multiplier. They're not getting a T4 timeout because the T4 timer is actually 30 seconds in the modem. So if I have a 4x T4 multiplier in the modem, that's 4 times 30. So I was talking about 4 times 15 for our sending of the station maintenance, but the modem's T4 timer is 30 seconds. Multiplied by 4, that's 2 minutes. So you could unplug the cable of a DOCSIS 3.0 modem, and it might stay downstream locked for 2 minutes straight.
That's if it has 4 channels that it's doing.
Yeah,
right?
Assuming it's doing 4-channel upstream bonding. So basically, he's stuck with a 4x multiplier. 4 times 30 is 120. That's 2 minutes. So there's a case where you're just sitting there wondering what's going on. You're better off power cycling the modem than just pulling the RF.
Yeah, well, it's good if you're pulling pads in a return to look for return path noise.
True. Modem stay online a lot longer. That's true. So the other solution would be, and I've been kicking around this idea with some customers, is hard setting my T4 multiplier to 2. It's kind of like a compromise. If I'm doing 4-channel bonding, I can at least cut that in half to 2. Yes, I am increasing station maintenance on the whole box, but it's pretty minuscule, and you know that too. You've looked at the amount of station maintenance and how much bandwidth it actually takes. It's minuscule.
Yeah, it's nothing. Yeah, the packets are extremely small.
Yeah, so that's one idea, is actually hard setting my T4 multiplier to 2 to get more granularity or more responsiveness to my MER, my levels, my pre-equalization, which then also affects P&M, obviously, right? P&M is pre-equalization.
Yeah, it's a big part of it, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I guess that was the original part of it.
Yeah.
I still think of P&M is upstream, but P&M is everything, right?
Correct.
Upstream, downstream, full bandwidth capture, you name it.
Yeah, it's grown a little.
A lot. So one of the things I wanted to kind of dive into was the MER and some of the things we've seen lately with fluctuating MER readings. And there's a couple of things I wanted to bring up to kind of educate customers and our viewers, if you will. The MER is modulation error ratio, and some people call it SNR. It is really the same thing, but it is not the same thing as CNR. Carrier to noise ratio is just a spectrum analyzer, peak to peak, amplitude to amplitude, noise, ingress, whatever.
Yeah. Carrier to noise ratio is CNR. Carrier to noise, which is the top of the carrier to the noise floor, whatever crap is in the noise floor.
Correct. So on a spectrum analyzer, you're not seeing group delay or timing issues. You might be able to see a standing wave with a spectrum analyzer, but microreflections, you might not see it on a spectrum analyzer, depending on where the microreflection is.
Oftentimes, you also won't see if there's noise underneath the carrier, because underneath that QAM channel, because it's always full of data.
And what if you have a burst from another modem overlapping?
Transmit at the same time.
On a spectrum analyzer, on a spectrum analyzer, you just think it's the same modem. You don't know who it is. So you can have two modems transmitting on top of each other because it's miswired, or the timing, like a modem's time offset is bad. So when it was told to send, it actually wasn't that far away, and it overlapped with somebody else's actual information that had good timing.
Yeah, and those are RF collisions, and we actually know those happen due to microreflections, for example. You can have that a microreflection is just an impedance mismatch, and so that can happen. That's another reason it can happen.
Correct. So we see these things happening, and we know that we have ingress cancellation on the CMTS to help cancel narrowband steady state ingress, which is good, like CB, Citizens Band, some ham radio. But we also have pre-equalization in the modem. So the pre-equalization in the modem can help with standing wave issues, microreflections, group delay. But I want to reiterate that the MER reading itself is based on the station maintenance burst. So that is from the station maintenance mod profile. It is also dictated by that T4 multiplier we just talked about. But to be specific, if you look at an upstream burst in the time domain, you have a preamble, then you have the actual information, and you have a roll-off or guard time at the end, the guard band at the end, or guard time, if you will. That preamble, it has a QPSK pattern, regardless if the station maintenance is QPSK or 16 QAM. So you can say my station maintenance burst and my mod profile is 16 QAM, but the beginning of the burst, the preamble, is always going to be a QPSK pattern. Now, when you compare that pattern from regular QPSK to 16 QAM, QPSK station maintenance uses a QPSK 0 preamble pattern. And 16 QAM uses a QPSK 1 preamble pattern. And it turns out it's 3 dB difference. So using 16 QAM for the station maintenance burst could give you 3 dB difference in your levels, your MER reading. And I've seen it really be dependent on vendor and firmware of a modem. So that right there could give you a difference in readings. Even though nothing's changed in your cable plant, you just change your mod profile.
Yeah, and
how we're actually making that reading.
We talked earlier about this, that because we use different modulation profiles for station maintenance than we do data. So kind of just reiterating this again, that station maintenance mod profile that you're talking about for 16 QAM or QPSK. So we get an MER measurement than that, and if you change it from QPSK to 16 QAM, we get up to a 3 dB difference just in that.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
I think what you normally recommend is use 16 QAM, not QPSK.
Correct. Yeah, and usually on the station maintenance burst, we'd like to see 16 QAM because that is used for upstream bonding resiliency, that is used for ping DOCSIS, that is used for the flap list, that is used for your levels like we just talked about. So 16 QAM would be the way to go. You can make an argument that I'd like to do 64 QAM to match up with my data burst, but that's something that we don't allow because the upstream chipset vendor wants to make sure it's robust, and the lower modulation means more time on the wire. So a longer time in the time domain for the burst, the better chances the upstream chip can train on it and get a good reading.
Right.
So we won't allow 64 QAM for those first 3 bursts in the mod profile.
But I think it's really important for the tech in the field. They should really ask their DOCSIS people, or they should ask whoever they're working with to understand, are they running 64 QAM in the field? And if so, what is their station maintenance modulation? Because this is really important when troubleshooting. Correct.
So this MER is after the upstream chip decodes the signal. It's after ingress cancellation may have already fixed issues. It's after pre-equalization may have fixed some issues. So these are some self-healing features that we implement to make the RF plant better, to get good readings. But what if the MER is still fluctuating? So I had to dig a little bit deeper and get the actual algorithm that we're using. We take 10 samples and we average that for the MER reading. So if I have limited number of modems, then 10 samples could either take a long time to get, or it could be 10 samples from a single modem because of the T4 timer or when modems are responding. 10 samples or symbols aren't that many. But let me give you an example where I could have a real disparity in the MER between 2 different modems. You have the CMTS set up for 0 dBmV, but what if you have something called Power Adjust Continue 6 on, where normal modems hit the CMTS at 0, plus or minus 1, but you have some modems maxed out in power, and they're allowed to stay online, they hit at minus 5. Those modems hitting the CMTS at minus 5 obviously have 5 dB worse carrier to noise ratio. Mm-hmm. Now, typically, the SNR will be 5 dB worse as well. It could be even worser, because of group delay and microflections. My point is, if the upstream MER is averaging all these different modems, and some modems are different because their power level is different, that could cause some disparity, some fluctuation in your MER output.
Right. So what's the fix?
Well, for the Power Adjust Continue, I feel like it's a good Band-Aid to have to let modems register properly and stay online. The T4 multiplier, statically setting it to 2, I think works. Not doing Power Adjust threshold more than the default of plus or minus 1. We had a customer do a Power Adjust threshold of plus or minus 2. And that was basically saying, let the cable modem hit the CMTS at 0, plus or minus 2, and don't worry about if it's maxed out in power or not. Like, just let it, any modems come in. Like, you can have some modems at plus 1.75 and another modem at minus 2. Well, there's 3.75 dB difference in MER.
So I thought the modem could stay online all the way to minus 4 typically on a CMTS, unless you change
that's the Power Adjust Continue.
Okay.
And normally we tell people to set it to 6 to give yourself more headroom.
Right.
But there's another one called Power Adjust Threshold. That's the plus or minus around your nominal setting. Mm-hmm. Nominal setting is 0, right?
Right.
The default Power Adjust Threshold is plus or minus 1. I had a customer that opened that up more than they should have. They did it ±2, and that's not something we want to recommend.
Yeah, so you're kind of confusing me a little bit on this. So you can go all the way to -4, and the modem still stays online. What you're saying? So and that's called what again?
That's a power adjust continue.
Okay. The power adjust threshold of ±1. That's when the CMTS is just telling the cable modem stay within its window. If you change that to ±2, now the cable modem, it's just not going to get any adjustments if it's within ±2. Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
Correct.
So when the range response comes back to the modem and the modem is within +or-2, CMTS is going to say, hey, you're fine. I'm not going to make any adjustments to you.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. And so you end up with a wide variation in MER across your entire modem base.
Exactly. Yep.
Makes sense.
So that's sort of where I was going with the fluctuating MERs and kind of understanding that, we're looking for 10 samples. How many samples are we getting? Where are those samples coming from? Are they 2.0 modems? Are they DOCSIS 3.0 modems? Is it T4 multiplier? What's the station maintenance burst? There's a lot of variables coming into play affecting our MER readings.
Okay. Yeah. So I just threw up a slide on there, and that goes through. I didn't realize you had that slide included here. I put that up with fluctuating upstream MER readings. So any of our viewers watching this can actually see the details you had explained in that.
Yeah. Point. I didn't want to go too deep into that one because I was just kind of reading it off. But since you put the slide up there, the Broadcom chipset is the one giving us the MER readings, right? So I don't know. I don't care if it's Aris or Cisco, whoever, but it's still the same silicon. So it's a Broadcom chipset. We're all using the same silicon. But you'll notice that the higher readings that we could provide now, the granularity from one reading to the next one is a big jump. There's not real tight granularity. Like the first reading is 45, the second one is 42, the third one's 40. Back in the old days, we used to cap 36.12.
Yeah.
And that worked out pretty well. If you look at the readings below 36.12, it's more granular.
Yeah.
It drops from 36.12 to 35.56. So you get more granular readings. So if I have a really nice plant as a lab, you could have fluctuations between 45 and 39 that's purely related to the granularity of these error readings. What's coming back from the chipset has nothing to do with the plant. Right. It's like it's off by one error bit or something. So my point there would be, don't worry about fluctuating MER when you're well above 33 dB.
Sure.
Like, for instance, where does 64 QAM break?
27 dB?
23.
23.
Well,
it starts to degrade at 27.
Yeah. Well, it's 23. So anything above 33 is gravy, right? It's like icing on the cake. So for someone to get all up in arms to worry about fluctuating MER when it's 45 and 42, that's a good problem to have.
It's a good place to be.
MER? Yeah. But if you're below 33 and you're fluctuating 33 down to 30 and then 29, then that could be a concern.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to see 3-4 dB fluctuations when you're already down below 30.
Absolutely. So, John, I know you have a call coming up, so we have to wrap this up. I think we covered some good content today, and that's always our objective, is give everyone just something interesting to listen to every week, and we will try to work on your mic issues before the next show. I know we're working on a couple shows coming up. We're trying to bring everyone good contact everyone. Thanks so much for watching. John, thank you for your time. Good luck on your call today, and we'll talk next time. Bye, all. So,
the slides we put together, do you put it online for people to download as well? Or
if you're okay with that, we'll attach them to the YouTube, and that way they'll be available for everyone.
That's
put
fine
them
with
on
me.
our Volpe Farm channel.
Sounds good.
All right. So, John,
all right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.